Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Andrew Gullotta, and I'm joined by a very special guest. He's the host of the New York Islanders podcast, PT Isles for SB Nation. He's a WFUV sports alum and a person who wore many different hats and play-by-play and production over the course of his career. Joe Buono. Joe, how you doing?
Andrew, good to see you again, buddy. How you doing?
No, doing great. And, for you and, starting off with your time at Fordham, and the impact that Bob Ahrens had on you. Obviously, you organized the GoFundMe for him that you've passed along on social media. I feel like all the WFUV alums have been retweeting it, tweeting about it, and really it's spread like wildfire so far. So I just wanted to ask you about Bob's impact, not only on WFUV, but you personally. And, if this, really social media impact and really the impact of the GoFundMe has surprised you in any way, just how popular it's been.
Yeah, I would say the GoFundMe results are probably the least surprising thing that could have happened. And just so everyone knows, we launched this on Monday night, Tuesday morning, and have about $29,000 raised for Bob in just about 4 days. We had over $17,000 raised within the first 24 hours.
Wow.
So, I think that's really just the overwhelming support is really just a testament both to him and really, I think, the culture that he helped cultivate at WFUV for 20 plus years, which was really just one of paying it forward. He invested, so much of his life as a mentor to his students, to the young men and women that came through the station. So it's not really surprising that so many of us were really eager to help when he needed it, because for so long he devoted his time, effort, and energy into us and never asked for anything in return. So it's been amazing to see. There's obviously been support beyond just the sports alums, the news departments, other departments of FUV. We've had the parents of sports alums donate as well, and maybe some others that have just heard Bob's story and the impact he made on the university that have decided to donate as well.
In your time at WFUV, I'm assuming Bob taught you so many different things and maybe, words of wisdom, not just about the sports media industry, but also about life. Is there anything that sticks out to you in particular that you've used, maybe not only just when you got your start in, after you graduated Fordham, or something that you still use maybe now even?
Well, listen, you walk through those WFUV doors, and for me, that was 303 Keating, and now you guys have the luxury of the basement studios down in Keating Hall. You walk through there, you're 18, 19-year-old kid, and you may have aspirations, you may have passion, but you don't really know what it means to be a professional, right? And Bob, taught us how to be a professional in the business, because that's what the standard was, that if you were going to represent WFUV and you were going to be at these events and representing the station there, you were going to not only have to be at the low, you weren't going there to be at the lowest bar for what a reporter was supposed to do and act and talk and how you were supposed to dress, but you were going to go above that. So we set that standard pretty high early on. Again, the culture was there that when I walked in, people like Andrew Bogusch was there. Spiro Ditas had just graduated. We knew of Tony Reale and others that had already started having success and having a foothold in the industry. So you wanted to not let those people down, and you felt like you were already bigger, you were part of something bigger than yourself. And he was a perfectionist at times, and I would butt heads with him, and like others, I think probably butt heads with him, because you would be in that studio room, be 11:30 midnight, and he's fighting over 30 seconds or 3 seconds worth of time because you told him the Jets report was going to be 2 minutes and it was 2:01. And I would say, Bob, what difference does it make? No, it's a 3-hour program, one-on-one. This 1 second is not going to matter. And he would tell me it matters, because there would be certain situations in life where if you worked on ESPN, or you worked for WFAN, or you worked for Sirius, if you're a producer and your boss said you have a 30-second clip or 1 minute, that did not mean 1:05, because that meant that something else was going to get cut off of later on. So, there was those elements of just kind of spending that extra amount of time to make sure you got it right and make sure you didn't have to do it over, that, he drilled into us very early on. And, FUV is a special place with a lot of special people. And he was really, the constant throughout that time.
And you talk about being a professional in so many professional settings, and WFUV is really unique because you get to be, a reporter in so many professional settings, whether that be all the New York teams. I mean, being play-by-play for football, basketball, all those different settings. Is there anything that really sticks out to you, or a memory that you have, or an experience that you have where, you were able to kind of, obviously be a college kid in these professional settings where you're able to use those, tips and tricks that FUV has kind of taught you?
There's a few. I mean, the first one was, when I was a sophomore and I was really itching to start to really be part of the program to do more, but you kind of, you pay your dues, you wait your time, you look for your opportunities. And it was that spring of 2002. And myself, Frank Mentasana, who works over at NHL.com, and Rich Savino, who works at the MLB Network, we reached out to Bob and said, hey, if we were able to drive down and get to Florida, could we get credentials to cover the Mets and Yankees? And at that point, none of us had covered the professional teams for FUV. We had covered, the local, our basketball, our football games, and had press credentials and attended those press conferences, but nothing approaching that. And he said, if you go down there, we'll get you credentialed. So the three of us got into my parents' 1989 Chevy Caprice and drove 20 hours down. Wow. We did 3 days with the Yankees at Legends Field. We did a few others at Port St. Lucie with the Mets, and then drove back up and fed sound back to the station. We had interviews with Roger Clemens and Mike Piazza and Brian Cashman and Bobby Valentine and Steve Phillips. We hit a home run. We did great. Yeah. But he trusted us, and he was still giving us our critiques around the questions that we were going to ask, how we were going to ask those questions, making sure that we didn't have yes and no type of questions when we were seeking those answers. So there was always those opportunities for people that were eager to do it. And then really, as I tried to craft myself as a play-by-play announcer, he would spend a ton of time. He probably drove home from the Bronx to New Jersey, listening never to the radio, but only to cassette tapes of people doing play-by-play. And you would either get a call later that morning or even that night with a firm critique as to how you did. And that continued even after college. I got a job for a period of time working as the play-by-play announcer for the New York Dragons of the Arena Football League, which was a nice little break for me. They had some TV games scheduled. So Peter Schwartz, who people probably know in the industry, he got to do the TV broadcast and I got to do the radio side of things. And, I did the football game, and 10 minutes after the game and I sign off, who calls me? Bob. He had listened to the entire game wow. and gave me the critique of it. And he did that for everyone. And I think, Andrew, what's more amazing to me now as I've gone through this fundraiser and the outreach I've received throughout so many students is when I was there, he was only there for 4 or 5 years, I think. Mm-hmm. But as he was there for 20, the amount of people he had to, because the mentorship did not stop when you left the station, it continued. Yeah. So if you needed him for anything, he was always there. So to have the time and the bandwidth and to invest yourself and spread yourself as thin as he did to make sure that everyone felt that you were the most important person when you were talking to him, doesn't come across too often. And I think that's why people have rallied around him so much in his time for some financial need.
And, you talked about earlier, just the, almost like a brotherhood of FUV and kind of what people are able to pay it forward. And that's something that Bob really instilled as you entered the sports media field. Was there, something that, either you paid it forward to some other alum or maybe someone did it to you that you were able to kind of utilize that Fordham network? And then also just something it's because it's so unique. Is there anything that you've seen kind of once you've left Fordham and kind of using that network?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm someone, and we talked before when we did the, on the record a year or so ago, I'm someone who kind of left pursuing broadcasting full time. I still work. Mm-hmm. In addition, I do a lot of work for the Islanders. I have a podcast. I have an Isles Fix newsletter. I do those type of things, but full time, I don't do it anymore. But when I was pursuing it, my first jobs were because of the Fordham doors that opened. Mike Yam had started working at Sirius Satellite Radio and got myself and a bunch of others a foot in the door at Sirius Satellite Radio being like board ops. Yeah. And from there, I was able to produce some shows, do some updates. And then, he created kind of already that kind of, there was a automatic pipeline from FUV into Sirius those first years, 2004, 2005, 2006. Guys like Nick Costos ended up being an intern, worked for Adam Shine all those years.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's doing his thing on You Better You Bet for Audacity. Sean Butler has worked his way up. I think he's a sports director there. He was running the NBA channel for a period of time. Mike Moriarty is still a presence around games doing things. So, that was just an example where one of us got a foot in the door, and then we're able to then create a bit of a pipeline for FUV students to flourish, and a number of them took those opportunities and continue to work in those careers as well. And then I'll give you a personal example, another one that came from me. Everyone knows who Mike Breen is. Now, he not only is the Knicks announcer, but he's really the voice of the NBA. And when I was at Fordham and you were a sophomore or junior, there was a chance that during a workshop, they may not get to everyone's tape when a Mike Breen or even a Marv Albert or Bob Costas or Gary Cohen came to critique us. Generally, the guys that were on air doing the play-by-play as seniors would get their tapes listened to in front of the rest of the crowd, the classroom. Yeah. And then everyone else would follow. And I handed Mike Breen my tape, and I didn't think anything of it. The guy's super busy. And I gave him a copy of my cassette tape. And it was the summer of that year after the NBA finals. And he gives me a call. First off, apologizes that it took so long to get back to me because he had been busy, calling the NBA finals, and spent 10, 15 minutes with me talking about my basketball tape. I mean, how awesome is that? And so when that happens to you, when then someone like Mike Breen does that for you, you're going to do that for anyone that ever needs any help. And I would do that for any FUV student ahead of me, that came before me in any way. And it doesn't have to be sports related, right? If we have that connective tissue, which was the station, which was Bob, which was that community, I'll be willing to help, and I'll be your biggest fan, and no matter what you do.
No, that's definitely so awesome. Before I let you go, Joe, I just wanted to ask, how can people donate to the GoFundMe for Bob, and where can they find it? Websites? Is it, Twitter, any of that stuff?
Yeah, so a number of alums have tweeted out the link on their personal accounts. I think right now the easiest way to search it online is just type in GoFundMe and Bob Ahrens. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to try to put the links on to where we're going to be posting this interview, we're 101, and the YouTube page as well, just so people know where we're at. We're just about at $30,000 raised for Bob. And just kind of the background here, Bob's 85 years old. He devoted 20 years of his life to Fordham University. And he used to always tell us, he's not in it to be rich, right? Yeah. He was in it to help WFUV students become the best of their ability. And, like it could happen to a lot of people, he's fallen on some tough financial times to where, it got to a point where he was no longer full of pride and was willing to ask for help. And, myself and Frank Mentasana had lunch with him in early November, and it was clear that he was in some tough times, and he reluctantly agreed for us to do this type of outreach. I mean, now he's excited about it. Now he wants to see how high the number is going to go, but at the time reluctantly agreed to get some help. And we're going to use the money to first pay off any outstanding debts that there are out there that he needs to make sure that his living situation remains stable and where he currently is in his apartment. And then we're going to work with the various different resources that are available in the state of New Jersey and elsewhere to create a better living situation for him, whether that results in a move or other types of programs that he should be qualified for and might not be currently utilizing, because there are probably a lot of men and women in their 80s and 90s that, need people to check in them periodically and make a phone call and see how it is they're doing. And, maybe we don't do that often enough. Not everyone is going to be as lucky as some of us to either have the money or the immediate family support system that's always going to be there. And, Bob is lucky that he has an amazing support system scattered throughout the country because of FUV. And we're going to do our very best to get him in a very stable situation so that something like this doesn't ever happen again.
Thank you for, heading this and kind of just seeing the power of the WFUV sports family. It's definitely something that is extremely powerful. And even as someone that's still in school, you kind of see of like, wow, how, much impact and meaning, one person could just have on so many different people within the sports industry. It's
the ripple effect. It's the ripple effect of paying it forward, and you feel an obligation to him. You feel an obligation to the people that came before and after you. Yeah. I've gotten calls and emails from students that I never have spoken to and met, but they kind of knew of me, and I've kind of known of them just because they were coming through the ranks.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to their parents in the last week about how much they care about Bob and what Bob meant to their sons and daughters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty powerful stuff.
That's definitely for sure. The host of the PT Isles podcast and WFUV alum, Joe Buono. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
My pleasure, Andrew.
We'll be right back on 101, New York's longest running sports call-in show.